सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Has India been killing terrorists on foreign soil? Well, let's summarize what we know. The first case concerns something that isn't an assassination, probably wasn't even an attempted assassination, but was certainly an attempt to kill someone, if you get the difference. Here's what we do know. The United States leaked to the foreign press that it was concerned about an attempt to kill a Sikh leader, a Khalistani leader called Gurpatwant Singh Pannoon. Now, you probably have heard of Pannoon. He's the obnoxious guy, the loathsome guy who threatens Indians, threatens to damage our aircraft, threatens us with violence. He is, from all accounts, not a particularly salubrious character. He is a dual citizen, he says, of Canada and the United States. Now, here's the allegation. The allegation is that India, or the Indian government, tried to have him killed. Initially, what we had was just a leak to the press, but it now transpires this has been going on for a while. The CIA director came to India to discuss this with our intelligence agencies. Other American officials have come to discuss it. And a couple of days ago, the US government, in particular the attorney in New York, filed a case. The case was against an Indian citizen, and it said that the said Indian citizen, a private individual, probably a private individual against whom there are criminal charges, because that comes up later, contacted a guy, an underworld figure in America, and said he wanted Pannoon killed. In the course of this conversation, apparently he said that he'd been dealing with an official in the Indian government, and this was official, promised the guy a lot of money, handed over $15,000 apparently as advance payment on the hit. Unknown to him, the guy he was dealing with was actually a confidential informant for the American government. He took the matter to US authorities, who said, okay, go along with this, find a so-called assassin, except that the assassin who he recommended turned out to be an undercover US agent. The Americans, of course, did not act on anything to do with Pannoon. They increased Pannoon's protection, and they traced the guy whose name was Gupta, the private Indian citizen who'd been organizing all this, and he was arrested while he was in Eastern Europe. The Americans claim that during the interrogation, he said that he'd been approached by an agent of Indian intelligence. He's not named, or the Americans have not named the guy concerned, but it seems quite clear that he was part of RNAW or something like it, because he suggested he was in the police, he's been part of security. And this guy said to Mr. Gupta that if you organize this attempt on Pannoon, if you actually organize a hit on Pannoon, then you have a criminal case in Gujarat, we'll sort that out for you. This is a pretty clear indication that yes, the Americans believe the Indian government was involved. The allegation is serious enough for the Indian government not to dismiss it out of hand. We've made statements saying like, we're going to constitute a high-level inquiry, we're going to check what happened, you know, this is not our way, this is not what we do, etc. But I think it has the potential to become very embarrassing for India. There was before this a second case, and that was a case in Canada. There the allegation was that another Khalistani was murdered by Indian agents. This allegation was leveled by Justin Trudeau, who's the leader of Canada. And unlike the Americans, who handled this maturely, dealt quietly with the Indians, didn't accuse the Indians at any official level of being part of the conspiracy or whatever, the Canadians went to town. Trudeau issued a statement in which he said he believed that the Indians were probably involved. And as if to prove that in his mind the Indians were already guilty, he expelled an Indian diplomat who he said was the station chief for RNAW in Canada. This was a somewhat foolhardy thing to do because it made it incumbent on the Indian government to deliver a strong and vigorous response. And that battle is still going on in diplomatic terms. The Indian government's view is we had nothing to do with this. If you have any hard evidence that we were involved, show it to us. Canada so far, at least publicly, has not released any evidence. The Indian government says off the record, all of this is based on briefings, so it may be true, may not be true, is that the evidence Canada is relying on is intercepts. These intercepts were provided to Canada by America under the Five Eyes Intelligence Cooperation Network. The Americans do not want any of their intercepts released publicly. They don't even want details of their surveillance released. So Canada is unable to publicly provide the proof, and India is able to say, look, you have no proof, you're just attacking us. So that's what we do know about the two attempts. One attempted murder or an attempt to murder, and the other definitely a murder. That's the first part of the issue. Here's the second part. Should we be doing it? Well, to answer that question, you have to look at the international context. The battle against terrorism is a morally gray area. There are no blacks, there are no whites. The idea of killing terrorists without going through due process, without going through the courts, is not a new one. It's something the United States has done for many years. More recently, under President Obama, the process became official. There was something called a kill list, which the president signed off on. And the Americans would then try and find the man they had to kill, either kill him in a commando operation, kill him in a missile strike, or kill him in a drone attack. There have been countless such drone attacks and strikes all over the Middle East, Pakistan. Hundreds of people have died in collateral damage, but the Americans have said it's worth it because we are fighting a battle against terrorism. It's the same with pretty much every country you can think of. In the West, the Brits, the French, everyone has been accused of this. The Israelis have made tracking down terrorists, or people who they claim are terrorists, and killing them a matter of pride. In nearly every country in the West, the idea of hit teams taking out terrorists is a popular theme in popular culture. You see it in Munich, which is Steven Spielberg's film about the Israeli response to the Munich Olympics attacks, when they tracked out every person who had apparently killed the Israeli athletes and killed them. You see it even in Britain, where the great popular hero is James Bond, and what's the claim? He is licensed to kill. So the idea of state-sponsored assassins taking out the bad guys is one that captures the imagination in almost every country. It also captures the imagination in India. If you've read recent Western commentary on the response to the Canadian charges, people say they're appalled by the fact that Indians are not outraged by the allegation. But the truth is, nobody in America is outraged either. When the Americans tracked down Osama bin Laden and killed him, the people who killed him were heroes. Nobody said, what is the proof? Has he been convicted by a court of law? People sort of accept that when it comes to terrorists, particularly terrorists who are operating outside your borders, it's not always possible to conduct trials or to go through due process. So the Indian response to the killing of Nijar and possibly the attempt on Pannoon has been broadly this: we don't know if we did it, but if it wasn't us, it should have been. We need to find these guys and we need to kill them. It's not a particularly laudatory thing. Nobody should be happy with people being murdered. On the other hand, that's the way the world is. That's the way the battle against terrorism is conducted all the time. Look at Israel. Apart from the fact that the West glorifies whatever Israel does when it comes to taking out terrorists, there's also the current situation in Gaza. Hundreds, possibly thousands have died in Israeli bombings and Israeli strikes. The Israelis say that these damaging strikes, that the civilian deaths are okay because they're just collateral damage in the battle against Hamas terrorism. So there is no black and white. Sometimes it's okay to kill terrorists. Sometimes it's okay to kill other people while you're trying to kill terrorists. Nobody really is very different from each other. So I don't think any country has the right to pass judgment on another country when it comes to this, because everybody does it in some form or the other. That leaves us with the big questions. Should India do it? Morally, are we right to do it? Or should we take the line that it's completely wrong to assassinate people without due process. Well, this is a slightly academic discussion because we kill people in India in encounters all the time. So the question really is, should we do it abroad? It's a hard one to answer, but I think one thing is clear. We cannot give away that right. We cannot say we'll never do it, because if the rest of the world does it, why should India be any different? That's question number one. Question number two, are we doing it properly? Well, even if we are doing it, clearly we're not doing it properly. If you look at the story in the indictment, the attempt on Panoon, it's a tale of ineptitude. That is, something that's almost out of a comedy movie or a Keystone Cops show. You do not organize assassinations in this manner. It's really inept and scandalously bad. So if you are going to do it properly. Next, once we do it, and if people are caught, what do we do when the other country objects? I think the short answer, and this is, if you've seen spy fiction, you will know that this is the rule. The rule is deniability. Anybody who does this, the country that has sent him always denies that it is involved. That person faces the courts, faces the law of the land where he or she operates. That's the way it always works. I don't think we have any right to say that the Americans, or if the Canadians, if the allegation is valid there, should treat us any differently. If you've committed a crime in a country, you should be prosecuted for it. Later, maybe you can work out some kind of deal with that country at a diplomatic level. But a crime is a crime, even if your government sends you to do it. That leaves us with the really big question. Does it make sense for India to send assassins to kill Khalistani terrorists? Assuming, of course, for the purpose of argument, that these charges are valid. And it must be emphasized, we say in the case of the Canadian, they're completely invalid. In the case of the American thing, we say we're looking at it, we're investigating, but we haven't denied it outright. But should we be doing it? Well, here's my position. The Khalistani movement made India suffer greatly. Throughout the 80s, there were murders, there was terrorism, thousands of people died. It was a terrible phase in India's existence. But the Khalistani movement as it now exists is a sort of lunatic idea propounded by Sikhs who live in Canada and abroad. It is an idea that has no support on the ground at all. Nobody in Punjab really wants Khalistan. Nobody in Punjab, at least as far as we know, is creating any kind of violence in association with these Canadian Sikhs. It's an idea, a noisy idea, an irritating idea, but not an idea that poses, I think, a danger to peace and stability in Punjab. So you've got to ask yourselves, is it warranted for us to organize assassinations in foreign countries when it's only at this level, when there is no credible threat to peace and safety in India? Yes, there might be if the movement catches on. But so far, I don't think it's reached that critical mass. Should we be conducting assassinations in America, our closest ally? I think it's extremely foolhardy to do that. The Americans will usually cooperate if you provide hard evidence of some kind of terrorist activity. To organize an assassination in America, to force the Americans to respond in this way, is the height of foolishness. And finally, if we are going to take the line, which I think most Indians do, that terrorists must be taken out, don't worry about anything, there is no right and wrong in these matters, are we going after the right people? The Americans took revenge for 9/11. They tracked down the people involved. It took a long time, but they finally found Osama bin Laden and they took him out. How have we responded? We've just had the 26/11 anniversary. All of the people who organized 26/11 are still at large. They're living in luxury, they're living in comfort. There is nothing stopping them from going ahead. Let's take Dawood Ibrahim, who we say was involved in the Mumbai bombings. If Dawood was involved in the bombings, as we say he was, have we taken any action against him? No. He's still living in comfort, in luxury. We know where he is. We knew he was in Dubai. We know he's now in Karachi. He's in Pakistan. But nothing happens. So here's my question. First of all, I think it's a morally gray area when you organize assassinations. Yes, maybe it's justified. But should you be killing noisy Khalistanis? Should you be doing it in friendly countries? Should you be doing it so ineptly? And if you really are going to follow a policy of we will track you down and we will kill you if you damage a certain anything in India, if you harm an Indian life, let's deal with the real terrorists, right? Why is Hafiz Saeed going around not worried? Why is Dawood living in luxury? Do we not want to attack the real terrorists? Or do we just not have the capacity or the capability or the intelligence to do it?